Before we begin to talk about the brachas that Moshe Rabbeinu gives to the Shvatim at the end of his life, I think maybe we need to stop for a moment and try to understand where the koyach habracha, where does this strength to be able to give brachas, where does it come from? The Pasuk says that Moshe Rabbeinu is an ish ha'elokim, man of God. Moshe Sternbuch, in his Sefer Tam V'Das, explains that there needs to be a fusion of both the spiritual dimension of a person and the physical dimension of a person. In the words of Chazal in the Medrash, it says that the upper half belongs to Hashem and the lower half belongs to the humans. And it's because Moshe Rabbeinu has reached the perfect balance between the two that he's able to bless each shevet so that they can utilize their physical success and turn it into spiritual success. There's a very famous Gemara. The Gemara says in Bava Metzia on Daf Pei Daled, relates a story. Rish Lakish, who was a bandit chieftain, he was a robber, was immeasurably strong, physically strong, to the point where he didn't bother going to cross across the rivers using a bridge, but he would just jump from one side to the other. That's how strong he was. And once Rabbi Yochanan was bathing in the river, and Rish Lakish jumped across. Rabbi Yochanan was renowned for being not just one of the greatest rabbis in his generation, but he was also an extremely handsome person. And Rish Lakish was so impressed with his beauty. And Rabbi Yochanan told him, he said that if you are prepared to learn Torah with me, then I'll let you marry my sister who's even more beautiful than I am. And Rish Lakish agreed. Rish Lakish told him that I just have to go back across the river, go and get my things, and I'll come and I'll join you. The Gemara says that Rish Lakish tried to jump back over the river the same way that he arrived, and he couldn't do it. He didn't have any strength. And he didn't understand what's happened. He got scared. Rabbi Yochanan explained to Rish Lakish that the minute Rish Lakish agreed with 100% sincerity to learn Torah, the physical brachas that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had given him were channeled into the spiritual realms. Which means that we can utilize the koiches, the powers that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives each and every one of us. We can utilize them in the physical realms or we can utilize them in the spiritual realms. But we have to know that where we're channeling, where are we putting these things. Says Rav Moshe Sternbuch, that's the pshat of ish elokim. Ish elokim means that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to channel his koiches into the spiritual realms, and by doing that he's capable of giving brachas to the shvatim that they should do exactly the same thing. The Medrash in the Yalkut Shimoni says something, takes it all one step further. He said something else. It says that Moshe is granted the title of Ish Elokim now because he blessed the shvatim. Which means there seems to be some kind of a relationship between being able to bless and blessing. And once someone's being blessed, to be able to give a blessing back in return. But the Yalkut Shimoni is teaching us something else as well. True leadership means that a person's able to relate, he's able to relate to the people that he's leading. Doesn't remain aloof, doesn't remain detached, but rather he's able to relate to them to the point where he can tap into their inner beings and he can give them a bracha. I once heard a beautiful story about a young widow who came to a Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who was the Poisek Ador. She asked for his advice. She had small children at home, and she wanted to know what could she do in order to make an aliyah for the neshama, to allow her husband's neshama in the shamayim to rise even higher. And Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who was the Gadol Ador, the greatest rabbi in the generation, he told this young almona, buy your children toys, play with them, make them happy. That's the very best thing that you can do for your husband's neshama. A leader has to understand each person, what's good for them and what's right for them. And the ultimate leader in Klal Yisrael is Moshe Rabbeinu, Ish HaElokim. But there's something else over here as well. The pasuk later on says, Vayomos Shom Moshe Eved Hashem, that when Moshe's life came to an end, the pasuk says that Vayomos Sham Moshe died over there. Who was this Moshe Eved Hashem? Servant of God. And Rashi explains, Rabbi Meir Oimer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Oimer, O Moshe Kosef B'dimo. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the last few verses using his tears. He was crying. The simple pshat in the Gemara is that Moshe Rabbeinu was crying because he came to the end of his life and he wasn't able to fulfill any more mitzvahs. But the Tiferes Shlomo says something incredible. Tiferes Shlomo says that Moshe Rabbeinu cried because he had to write about himself that he was an Ish Elokim and an Eved Hashem. The humility of Moshe Rabbeinu. He cried tears because he had to write about himself something which he felt was too grandiose. Which means that being a leader of the generation is something that comes with the responsibility of recognizing that everything that was achieved because HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed for those things to happen. I once asked the Chazon Ish if he realized that he was the Gadol Ador, he was the greatest rabbi in his generation. The Chazon Ish answered that he does, but that he wished that there were greater people than him. That way he could be influenced to do even more than he was already doing. To aspire to become the Gadol Ador, to aspire to become the greatest rabbi in the generation, the greatest leader in the generation, is something that we can all aspire towards. But we need to recognize that it comes with the most enormous responsibilities. So let's look at some of the brachos that Moshe Rabbeinu gives to the tribes on the last day of his life, the last moments of his life. Let's start with the first one. Moshe Rabbeinu blesses the tribe of Reuven, Yechi Reuven Val Yamut, that they should live and they shouldn't die. What does that mean? Surely if a person is alive, then they're not dead. And if a person is dead, then they're not alive. However, Moshe Rabbeinu is including in his bracha over here a lesson of astonishing depth. It's possible for a person to be physically alive and yet to be considered dead. And it's possible to be physically dead and still to be considered alive. The Gemara in Brachos on Daf Yud Ches says like this: Tzadikim shebimisosim nikru chayim. The tzadikim, even when they're dead, are considered to be alive. They're called alive. And later on the Gemara says, V'rashoim shebachayein kruim mesin. Rashoim, wicked people, even when they're alive, they're considered to be dead. What's the message that Moshe Rabbeinu is giving over on the last moments of his life that's so incredibly important? That there's more to life than just eating and sleeping. I read an account of a train on its way to Auschwitz. It was already the 5th day of our miserable journey in the cattle car, with 85 people crammed inside. The doors were locked, and only a small window covered with wire gave a little air. The heat was unbearable. Our weak bodies felt lifeless, and some of the old people died during the long and awful journey. It was the 5th day without water, and only one slice of bread every day. It was deathly quiet. Nobody had the strength to speak. Anyway, what was there to speak about? Of our future? Many of us had already heard the reports of the gas chambers and realized that we probably only had hours left to live. There was no escape. Suddenly, a surge of rage welled up inside of me. Why should I die at the age of 17? Why can I not live to an old age? I looked around at the old people in the carriage looking peaceful in this dreadful situation, and I wished that I could see the end of this war. I thought of the faces of my unborn children, but it seemed that there were only hours to go, and I became resigned to the situation. Suddenly the train stopped. Our window was near a telegraph pole where men were working, and one of them began to speak to us in German through the small window. Wasser, he said, water, showing us that he had a bucket of water. And through sign language, he communicated with us that he would be prepared to hand over some of his water in exchange for items of clothing, a shirt, a shoe, whatever it might be. We discussed his offer amongst ourselves for a few minutes, and we decided to agree to the deal, despite the danger involved. If one of the German soldiers would have seen what was going on, he would have killed us all. But our thirst was so great that we decided to take the risk. We got together the required items of clothing and we pushed them out through the gaps in the wire-covered window and received a bottle of water in exchange. The person in charge of the wagon that we were in allocated the water, giving each person a small amount. But when it was my father's turn to get some water, everybody watched in shock. Instead of drinking the water, my father took the precious liquid and used it to wash his fingers. The person in charge of the wagon shouted at him, "How can you do this? How can you take this precious water and not drink it?" And then everyone was shouting at him. But my father took his tefillin in his hands and he replied, "I'm suffering from thirst, just like all of you. But even more than that, I'm suffering from being unable to put on tefillin for 5 days because I wasn't able to wash my hands. It's already the afternoon, and I want to put on my tefillin." Dear brothers, don't be angry with me. I have these tefillin since my bar mitzvah, and I've put them on every day except for Shabbos and for Yom Tov. We know, all of us, that this is our final day. We'll soon arrive at our destination. I want to put on my tefillin and pray one more time and thank Hashem for the life that He gave me. My dear brothers, I was born a Jew and I want to die as a Jew. And with these words, my father began to daven like I'd never seen before. I looked up to him, and he appeared to me like a malach, like an angel. And at that moment I resolved that if I ever get out of this misery alive, I'll remain a worthy daughter to my father. I'll never forget what Yiddishkeit meant to him, and I'll try to live up to his wishes, come what may. Only a short time later, the train stopped at Auschwitz. We were separated in the infamous selection, and I never saw my dear father, mother, and most of my family again. But those few drops of water and my father's words from the heart in those dreadful moments have accompanied me all my life. They've given me the encouragement to try and live up to my father's ideals and not to shame him. Yechi Reuven v'al tamut. What an incredible lesson Moshe Rabbeinu is giving over. That there's more to life than just eating and sleeping. We live in this world in order to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why we're here. That's what we need to do. Moshe Rabbeinu blesses the tribe of Levi. Ulevi Omar, Tumecha v'urecha leish chasidecha. Rabbi Yechezkel min Kuzma, one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, points out something quite fascinating. He says that Levi is the only Shevet that's given the title of being Chasidecha, Chasidim, righteous. So he asks, what's so special about Shevet Levi that they get given that title? Nobody else got it. And he explains something very beautiful. Shevet Levi, the tribe of Levi, was given no land amongst the other tribes. After the conquest of the land of Israel, Shevet Levi was spread out throughout the entire land of Israel, that there should be representatives everywhere. It's almost as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the God, is Shevet Levi's inheritance. As if to say that they get no physical property, only spiritual rewards, only spiritual benefits. However, says Rabbi Yechezkel Mikuzmir, if you look carefully, that's not so true. Because everybody who had land and was growing crops had to tithe their crops. And they would give 10% to the Levium. So in effect, Shevet Levi didn't lose out at all. They had plenty. But then he points out, he said, it's not so simple. Because it's true that even though the total amount that was given to the Shevet was plenty, nevertheless, there was no guarantee that any one individual in Shevet Levi would be given any of that Maisa, any of that tithe. Because the owner of the crops was able to choose who he wanted to give it to, which Levi he wanted to give it to. And it could be that there would be Levium that wouldn't receive anything at all, and other Levium that would receive a lot. So it transpires that on a personal basis, each Levi inside of the tribe, the only thing that he can rely upon is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He can't rely on receiving the tithe from a farmer because maybe he won't give it to him that year. The Levium relied on Hashem. They had pure and simple emunah. Pure and simple bitachon, faith that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would give them what they need. They had no worries, no concerns, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to take care of everything. The Pasuk says, Uleviim l'shiram ulezimram, that the Leviim are singing praises to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what they do. The Leviim were always besimcha, they were always happy. What an incredible lesson. To place your trust entirely in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that explains, Rabbi Yechezkel Mikuzmir, is the definition of a real chassid. That's chassidut. Ulelevi amar tumecha v'urecha leish chasidecha. Someone who's totally involved in praising Hashem. And because of that, they're called Chassidim. Listen to this beautiful story. Beautiful, true story. Kanai Nahara, here in Yerushalayim, there's no lack of poor people. And once, Erev Pesach, there was a poor Yerushalmi Jew who was very worried. He didn't have any money for matzah. He didn't have any money for wine. He certainly didn't have any money for meat and not for fish. And his harmony at home wasn't so great. His shalom bayis wasn't so great because his wife was also worried and she'd been very sharp with him recently. So somewhat dejected, he went to the local shul next to where he lived and he began to daven mincha. And his heart opened up with the tefillah and he cried out to Hashem. And he had extra kavanah by the bracha for parnasa. And then again, at the end of the Amidah, when people asked for their personal needs, he poured out everything that he had, he poured it out into that tefillah. There was a wealthy American Jew at the minyan. And he noticed how this impoverished Yid prayed with so much kavanah. And he also heard his tefillahs because the Yerushalmi Yid, he didn't realize that he was davening a little bit too loudly and everybody could hear what he was saying. So after mincha, the American introduced himself. He said, I couldn't help but overhear your tefillahs. Why don't you come to my hotel room and I'll give you something? So they went back together and they got to the American's hotel and they went up to his room and he gave him, Kanai Nahara, a big bundle of cash. enough money for Pesach, for his matzah, for his wine, for some meat, for some fish, and there was enough money left over to keep them going for a few months afterwards as well. When this Yerushalmi Yid met up with his friends, he told them what had happened. And of course his friends, the first thing they said to him was, tell me, did you get his address? Do you know how to get in contact with him again? So he says, no. He says, what do I need his address for? So they told him, in a few months you're going to run out of money. Whatever he gave you, it's going to run out. So you're going to need some more. You need to be able to write to him and say to him, remember me, send me more. And this Yerushalmi Yid says to his friends, what do I need his address for? I didn't ask him for money. I asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me everything I needed through that person. He says, when the money runs out and I'm in need again, I know exactly which address to go to. That's someone who lives in a world of bitachon, of belief that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is taking care of him. That's what a chassid is. A chassid is somebody who knows that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is holding his hand the whole time. Another bracha that Moshe Rabbeinu gave. Ulezvulun Omar, smach zvulun b'teisecho, v'yisocho bo elecho. Yisachar and Zvulun, they were a pair. Zvulun were the businessmen, very successful, went trading all over the discovered world at the time. And Yisachar, they stayed behind and they sat and they learned. And Zvulun physically supported Yisachar, and the tribe of Yisachar spiritually supported the tribe of Zvulun. They had a beautiful relationship between them, each one giving to the other one what the other one didn't have, each one complementing the other one. And Moshe Rabbeinu, his bracha to Zvulun is smach Zvulun b'teisecho. You should be happy as you go off to do your commerce, as you go off into the business world. Be happy. And Rashi says, tzlach b'tzeischa l'schoira. You should be successful in your business ventures. In the Hasidic Svarim, they explain like this. The secret to success is to be besimcha. If a person is besimcha, then he'll succeed. That's what Rashi is saying. Moshe says, smach zvulun b'teisecha, you should be happy when you go out. And Rashi says, then you'll have hatzlacha, then you'll succeed at what you do. Zvulun is besimcha, Zvulun is happy, he'll succeed in what it is that he sets out to achieve. I don't think this is a bracha which is applicable only to Zvulun. I don't think it's a bracha which is applicable only to those people that go out into the business world. It's a bracha for all of us. The secret to success in professional lives, success in our spiritual lives, success in our personal relationships, success in our relationship with Hashem, is to be besimcha. We should be happy. I once saw a very interesting idea. One of the Hasidic Rebbe says that there's no prohibition against being depressed, but all depression leads to sin. If we want to be successful at what we do, if we want to be successful in our relationship with Hashem, we need to be b'simcha. So once, on the first morning of Sukkot, a Jewish soldier dressed up in a Russian army uniform showed up at the Tish of the Yesod Avodah from Slonim, the Slonim Rebbe. The minute the Rebbe saw him, he said that he saw a great light on this fellow. This person's face was glowing with some kind of spiritual light. So after the Tish, all the Hasidim gathered around the soldier and they asked him what was going on. How come he had this incredible look to him? This spiritual aura. The soldier didn't really understand what they were making such a big deal out. But he told them what had happened the previous night, on the first night of Sukkot. He told them that his camp, his army camp, was right next to Slonim. And last night I was on guard duty. But all I really wanted to do was to fulfill the mitzvah of Sukkah, at least to eat a kazayas inside of the Sukkah, the minimum possible. I don't know, but for some reason the commander was watching us last night like a hawk. It was impossible to get out of the camp. I saw from the distance on the other side of the gate the sukkah of a Jew who lives on the outskirts of Slonim. And I was just waiting for the opportunity to be able to jump over the fence and to do the mitzvah, but I couldn't. The commander was always there and I couldn't get away from him. However, close to midnight, I noticed that the commander wasn't there anymore. So I quickly jumped over the gate and I ran to the sukkah. The family was already sleeping, and I knocked and I begged them to open the door for a Jew who desires immensely to eat in a sukkah. So the Balabayas opened the door, and quickly he brought me out wine so I could make kiddush, and I washed my hands, and I ate a kazayas of bread, and straight away after I finished the kazayas of bread, I benched, I recited Birkat Hamazon, and then they wanted to bring me other courses, and they wanted to bring me meat, and they wanted to bring me all kinds of things, but I couldn't. I went straight back to my post. I ran back to the camp, and you have no idea, my heart was beating in fear. And when I got back, I realized that the commander didn't even notice that I'd left. And I was so happy that I was able to perform this mitzvah that I danced the entire night. Until the morning, I just danced and I danced. I couldn't stop. The Yesod Avodah, the Rabbi from Slonim, told over the story and he explained to his Hasidim the great light that was pouring out of this soldier wasn't because he had Mesiras Nefesh, that he'd been prepared to sacrifice so much in order to eat in the sukkah on that night. But really, most of it came from his Simcha Shel Mitzvah. The fact that he was so happy, the fact that he was able to fulfill the mitzvah, and his yearning, and his love, and his joy, and his dancing from having done the mitzvah, brought him to a level that he shone. His face just shined with Kedusha. It's an amazing thing. Everybody here knows that Mishnah Brura is a halachic work. It deals with practical halachic issues, what can be done and what can't be done. However, the Mishnah Berurah writes in Tafresh Samach Tes, he quotes the Arizal, where the Arizal says about himself that he attained all of his spiritual greatness by being extremely happy to perform the mitzvahs. Sukkos is Zman Simchaseinu. Every Yom Tov, say Chazal, has Simcha Yesera. It's got an additional dimension of Simcha, but Sukkos has even more than that. Sukkos is a time of Simcha. Such lessons that Moshe Rabbeinu is giving over to the Jewish nation, not just to those that lived in the final moments of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, but for each and every generation, for each and every one of us now, living in this generation. Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching us what's required from us in order to be able to be connected to Hashem. So Shana Rabbah, one last idea to take home. Shana Rabbah has the most incredible importance inside of the Jewish year. It's considered to be the time when the final judgments that have been decreed from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are finally going to be passed. These last moments that started almost 2 months ago with Rosh Chodesh Elul, we need to do something to make everything that we've worked on over these last 7 weeks to become a reality. The Pasuk in Tehillim, in chapter Nun Aleph, says, Leiv nishba v'nidke Eloikim loy tivaze, that a broken and a crushed heart HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not despise. On that pasuk, on that verse, there's a very famous statement from the Kotzker Rebbe. The Kotzker Rebbe was famed for being extremely sharp, had extremely sharp, short statements. And the Kotzker Rebbe says that nothing is dearer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than a broken heart. And nothing is as whole in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a broken heart. Listen to this, one last story. True story that took place here in Yerushalayim. A person who owned a jewelry store, and one day a 9-year-old girl walks into the store and she says to him, I'm here to buy a bracelet. And she looks through the glass cases and she points to a bracelet. It was $3,000-$4,000 worth of bracelet. And the man behind the counter says to this little girl, he says, you want to buy that bracelet? And she says, yes. And he says to her, wow, he says, you have very good taste. Who do you want to buy it for? And she said, for my older sister. And he tells this little girl, he says, wow, that's so nice of you, but why do you want to buy your older sister this bracelet? And the little girl tells the store owner, because I don't have a mother and I don't have a father, and my older sister is taking care of us. So we want to buy her a present, and I'm willing to pay for it. And she pulls out of her pocket a whole bunch of coins that totaled exactly 7 shekels and 80 agarot. And the store owner looks at that money on the counter, all those coins, and he says to her, "Wow, that's exactly what this bracelet costs." And he wraps up the bracelet and he tells the little girl, "You write a card to your sister and I'll put this in a nice box and I'll put a beautiful bow on top." He wraps up the bracelet and he's wiping his tears away at the same time, and he gives the girl the bracelet. A few hours later, the older sister comes in and he tells the owner, she says, "I'm so terribly embarrassed. My sister shouldn't have come here. She shouldn't have taken this without paying for it." And he says to her, "What are you talking about?" So she says, "Well, what do you mean? This bracelet costs thousands of dollars. My little sister doesn't have thousands of dollars. She doesn't even have $10. She obviously didn't pay for this." And the fellow who owns the jewelry store told the girl, "You couldn't be more wrong. She paid me in full. She paid 7 shekels and 80 agarot and a broken heart." "I want to tell you something," he said. "I'm an alman, a widower. I lost my wife a number of years ago. People come into my store every single day. They come in, they buy expensive pieces of jewelry, but all these people, they can afford to do that. When your sister walked in for the first time in so very long, since my wife died, I once again felt what love meant." And he gave her the bracelet and he wished her well. We come in front of the Ribono Shel Olam, Rosh Hashanah, from the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, on Yom Kippur, and now through Sukkot. And we want to buy something very expensive. We want to buy life. But we can't afford to do it. We don't have the money to pay. We don't have the schusim, we don't have the merits to be able to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, "Give me life because I deserve life." So we come in front of the Ribono Shel Olam, we come in front of God, and we empty out our pockets. With whatever we've got, what have we got? We pour out onto the table a few paltry shkolim and agarot, a Kabbalah here, a Kabbalah there. I'll do this, I'll do that. I'll pick up the phone and speak to somebody who was lonely. I'll learn an extra 5 minutes a day. I'll be kind. I won't speak Lashon Hara. And when we make these Kabbalahs with a broken heart, the Ribono Shel Olam says, "You don't know how long it is. You don't know how long it's been since I felt what love really is." The Ribono Shel Olam sees how much we're willing to do, how much we love him. And he says on Hoshana Rabbah, "You know what? You've touched my heart here. have life. It's paid in full. Yirotzen, shenizkeh kulanu biyachad be'ez Hashem. To utilize these last fleeting minutes to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu just how much we truly love Him. And by doing that, Mitzvah Hashem, we should all be signed and sealed in the book of life, and that we should be blessed with a year of true closeness to Avinu Sheba Shamayim. Amen. Amen.